We are launching into an analysis today of a figure whose name is, well, it's known all over the world.
Really is.
But the full story, his incredible athletic career, his almost desperate drive as an entrepreneur, and the really tragic way his life ended, that context is often misunderstood.
It gets lost.
We're talking, of course, about Miles Gilbert Horton, who everyone just called Tim.
And this exploration is so important because the material we've looked at shows this incredible duality.
Yes.
On one side, you have this hockey legend, a four-time Stanley Cup champion. I mean, he was named one of the 100 greatest NHL players in history, just a dominant force.
And on the other
side is the co-founder of what became a multi-million-dollar franchise, a brand that really, you could say, defines Canadian culture today.
So our job here is to move past that familiar logo and really trace the whole story.
Exactly. From his pretty humble beginnings right through to the very complicated, very difficult reality of his last moments and the business legacy that came after.
Absolutely. The goal is to connect those two worlds. The punishing physical world of 1960s hockey and the dizzying speed of 1970s business franchising. Let's get into this incredible story, starting right at the beginning.
Northern Ontario.
Miles Gilbert Horton, born January 12, 1930, in Cochrane, Ontario. You almost never hear that full name.
No, he's just Tim.
So what does the source material tell us about that name? Where did Tim come from?
Well, it's an interesting little piece of his story. He was formerly christened Miles Gilbert, which was a nod to both his grandfathers, a formal honor.
Okay.
But that name it never stuck. His mother, Ethel May, had always wanted to name him Tim.
And so she did, basically.
She did, and that's a name he was known by exclusively from the time he was a child.
Really?
And you can almost see it as a bit of foreshadowing.
How so?
The man on the birth certificate, Miles Gilbert, versus the accessible, marketable persona the world would get to know, Tim.
And his background was deeply working class. That feels like critical context for the kind of player he would become.
Completely. His father, Aaron Oakley Horton, was a mechanic for the Canadian National Railway.
So the family moved around.
They followed the work, which really reflects that industrial economy of the time in Northern Ontario and Quebec. They were in Duparquet, Quebec, starting in 1935.
Then back to Cochrane.
Back to Cochrane in 38, and then they finally settled in Sudbury in 1945. These were tough northern towns.
Where hockey was everything.
It was more than a sport. For a lot of kids, it was one of the only real paths to a different kind of life.
And that path opened for him pretty quickly, didn't it? The Toronto Maple Leafs organization signed him in 1948.
That must have been a monumental moment for a kid from Sudbury.
It was a massive step. It brought him to Toronto, and he started playing junior hockey for St. Michael's College School.
Which was a powerhouse, a real factory for developing NHL talent back then.
So by 1950, he's a professional.
He is, though not right away in the big league. He spent some really crucial time developing his skills with the Leafs farm team.
The Pittsburgh Hornets.
In the American Hockey League,
Yeah.
yes. He played his first NHL game on March 26, 1950.
And once he finally stuck with the Leafs, he didn't just play for them. He became, really, the cornerstone of a dynasty.
He was there until 1970.
That entire span is what many people consider the golden era for that franchise.
That's right. And when you look at his time in Toronto, it wasn't so much about personal stats. It was about collective success. It was about winning.
He was the constant, the rock on defense.
The 4 Stanley Cup championships.
62, 63, 64.
And that last big one in 1967. That level of sustained team victory is what cemented his legacy, long before the donut shops were everywhere.
And the league recognized it years later.
They did. Long after he passed away in 2017, the NHL named him one of the 100 greatest NHL players in history.
Yeah.
That confirms his status among the absolute elite across all eras of hockey.
Let's focus on the player himself for a moment, because the material really highlights these two almost contradictory traits.
The immense physical strength.
And incredible poise. How did a defenseman in such a physically brutal era manage to combine those two things?
Well, the duality is what really set him apart from everyone else.
Yeah.
It was universally accepted that he was the strongest man in the game during his time.
An enforcer type.
He was often described that way, but he was nothing like the other tough guys of that period. He was so disciplined.
So not a lot of penalties.
Remarkably few for a player in his role. He was durable, incredibly hardworking, but he stayed out of the penalty box.
This wasn't just, mindless violence. This was controlled force.
Exactly. And the proof is in the accolades. He was an NHL first-team All-Star 3 times, '64, '68, and '69.
And a second-team All-Star 3 other times?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was clearly recognized by everyone for mastering the position, not just for surviving the physical contact.
This brings us to that classic story that seems to capture his unique style perfectly. The famous bear hug.
The bear hug. It's legendary because it shows how he could just neutralize a conflict through pure physical dominance without even throwing a punch.
So a player tries to fight him.
And Horton wouldn't fight back, not in the traditional way. He just wrapped them up in this crushing bear hug.
And the fight was just over.
It was over. The opponent was helpless, completely trapped by his strength, and the whole thing de-escalated without penalties or, serious injury.
And the highest praise for this came from his opponents. You have that famous quote from Bobby Hull.
One of the most powerful forwards of that era.
What did he say?
That quote is the ultimate testament. Hull said there were plenty of defensemen he feared because they were just vicious.
But not Horton.
No, he said he respected Tim Horton because Horton dominated you not with intimidation, but with pure ability. Hull's words were that he used tremendous strength and talent to keep you in check.
He was almost like a modern defenseman playing in the 60s, using strength with a surgeon's control.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
And that controlled strength, it translated into this incredible durability. The sources point out some records he set that are just mind-boggling, especially for his position.
It's phenomenal. It really speaks to his commitment and probably an unbelievably high tolerance for pain. He holds the Maple Leafs club record for consecutive regular season games.
486 straight games.
Between February of 1961 and February of 1968. Just think about that. 7 full seasons without missing a single game as a top-pairing physical defenseman.
That's unheard of.
That NHL record for a defenseman stood for almost 40 years. It wasn't broken until 2007 by Carly Scrastia.
This kind of resilience is why the later revelations about his substance use are so startling.
To maintain that level of consistency must have required some incredible measures.
And he wasn't just a shutdown guy either. We sometimes forget that he could contribute on offense.
Yes, he wasn't always seen as a primary scoring threat, but he was a very effective puck carrier. He could move the game up the ice quickly.
The material even says the Leafs tried him at right wing for a bit.
They did there. The 64-65 season, they experimented with it. But his real offensive burst came in the playoffs. In 1962, he set a league postseason record for his position. 16 points. 3 goals, and 13 assists.
And that was the benchmark.
It was the benchmark for defensemen scoring in the playoffs until Bobby Orr, the great Bobby Orr, finally surpassed it 8 years later. It just shows he was a complete dynamic player.
So his time with the Leafs ends in 1970. This marks the beginning of his late career transitions. But it's happening at the same time his business venture is just taking off.
It's a lot to juggle.
Let's look at the hockey moves first. They really highlight how precarious life was for an aging player back then.
The material shows that classic pattern for a veteran athlete. In March of 1970, after 2 decades in Toronto, he gets traded to the New York Rangers.
He plays there for a season and a bit.
Yes, and then in 1971, he gets moved again through a fascinating and now mostly obsolete mechanism.
He was claimed by the Pittsburgh Penguins in the intra-league draft. Can you explain what that was?
The intra-league draft was common back then. It let teams pick players from other clubs who were basically left unprotected.
A tough way to change teams.
Very tough. It lacked any of the control that modern players have through free agency. And so the Penguins claimed him. He was 41 years old.
And yet, even at 41, he was valuable enough to get a massive contract, at least by their standards.
Absolutely. The Penguins were only a 5-year-old franchise. They were desperate for leadership and credibility.
And Horton could provide that.
He signed a 1-year deal for an estimated $100,000.
Which was a lot of money then.
For context, that was the biggest contract the Penguins franchise had ever signed at that point. It just shows you how much they still valued his leadership and defensive reliability, even in his 40s.
But this is also the period where the physical toll seems to finally start catching up with the man who is so rarely injured in his prime.
It did. His time in Pittsburgh was really hampered by injuries. He had a broken ankle, a shoulder separation.
It limited his playing time.
It did. He only played 44 games that season. It's hard to imagine him dealing with those kinds of injuries while he's also trying to manage a business that's growing so fast back in Ontario.
His final stop as a player brought him back under a very familiar, very influential figure, Punch Imlach.
Imlach, who is his old GM with the Leafs, acquired him for the Buffalo Sabres in 1972.
Another interleague draft move.
Yes, and Horton was 42 by then.
Yeah.
The source material specifically notes he was dealing with a considerable nearsightedness.
But Imlach still wanted him.
Imlach knew him better than anyone. The fact that he wanted him, despite the age, despite the vision issues, it just underlines Horton's incredible work ethic and influence.
And he had an impact in Buffalo.
He did. He helped that young Sabres team reach a huge milestone, their first ever playoff appearance in 1973. He even signed an extension that summer. He was committed to playing right up to the very end.
Before we get to that final season, let's just touch on the jersey honors. His number 7 is legendary in Toronto, number 2 in Buffalo. But the Leafs' retirement policy it's a bit complicated.
It is, and it's a perfect example of how sports traditions change over time. In Toronto, he wore number 7, which he actually shared with another Leafs legend, King Clancy.
And for years, the Leafs had this unique policy.
They would honor a player's number, but not formally retire it, which meant other players could, and did, still wear it.
So number 7 became an honored jersey number in 1995.
Precisely. It was respected, but it wasn't off limits.
And that changed recently.
It wasn't until 2016 that the Leafs finally changed their policy and formally retired number 7 for both Horton and Clancy. So while his legacy was always celebrated, that ultimate tribute took decades to happen.
But Buffalo embraced him right away.
They certainly did. In Buffalo, he wore number 2 because number 7 was already taken by their star forward, Rick Martin.
And both numbers are now retired by the Sabres.
Both are. Number 2 for Horton, number 7 for Martin. It's an incredibly rare honor for a player to have his number retired by 2 different NHL clubs.
And of course, there are the other honors.
The Hockey Hall of Fame in 1977, the Buffalo Sabres Hall of Fame in 1982, and in 1998, the Hockey News ranked him number 43 on their list of the 100 greatest hockey players.
Okay, now let's connect that aging, injury-plagued career back to this fierce entrepreneurial drive he had. The business wasn't a hobby.
No, not at all. It was a driving necessity for a pro athlete in the 60s and 70s.
Before the big money and guaranteed contracts.
Exactly. He was actively looking for financial security outside of hockey. He co-founded the Tim Horton donut shop in Hamilton on Ottawa Street in 1964.
Right in the middle of playing for that Leafs dynasty.
Yes. And it's often forgotten that this wasn't his first attempt at a business.
What else did he try?
The material mentions some less successful ventures. He owned a hamburger restaurant at one point and also a Studebaker auto dealership in Toronto.
So he was determined.
He was. Those ventures didn't really take off, but they show his ambition to leverage his fame, his name recognition, into a business that could support his family after he was done playing.
So why did the donut shop work when the others didn't?
It seems to have been a mix of his famous name, a very focused concept, and a key partnership. The shop tapped into Canada's growing coffee culture.
And the material says he even added some of his own creations to the menu.
He did. But the success wasn't gradual.
It was explosive.
It was almost unprecedented. By 1968, just 4 years after that first shop opened, it had already become a multi-million-dollar franchise system.
So as his hockey career is winding down, he's juggling the physical grind of being an aging NHL player with the intense financial demands of a booming national brand.
It's a pressure cooker. And that's really crucial context for understanding the tragedy that was to come.
We have to turn now to the circumstances of his death. And for this part, we need to report the facts from the source material while being sensitive to the tragic loss of life. Tim Horton died in the early morning of February 21st, 1974.
He was only 44 years old and still an active NHL player.
The timeline is it's stark. The night before, he'd played a game in Toronto against his old team, the Leafs.
The Sabres lost that night, and he was playing with injuries, a jaw injury, an ankle injury. It forced him to sit out the third period.
And yet he was still named one of the game's 3 stars.
His dedication was just total, even right at the end.
And after the game, he decided to drive alone back to Buffalo. That's about 160 kilometers in the middle of the night.
And the car he was driving is a huge and very symbolic part of this story.
A De Tomaso Pantera.
A high-powered, mid-engine sports car. And the material specifies that this car was reportedly given to him by the Sabres general manager, Punch Imlach.
As an incentive.
As a specific enticement to persuade him to come back for that final season. It symbolizes the immense pressure on him to keep performing.
Before the crash itself, the sources detail some attempts by people close to him to get him not to drive.
Yes, there were clear warnings on the path to this tragedy. On his way out of Toronto, Horton stopped at his business office in Oakville.
And he met with his partner, Ron Joyce.
She did, and while he was there, he called his brother, Jerry. The source material makes a specific and very sad note that Jerry recognized that Tim had been drinking.
And he tried to talk him out of driving.
He tried to persuade him not to continue. Ron Joyce also offered him a place to stay for the night.
But he decided to keep going, down the QEW.
He did. Sometime after 4 in the morning, the Ontario Provincial Police got a call from a woman who saw a car speeding on the Queen Elizabeth Way.
A warning was broadcast.
About 30 minutes later, an officer, Mike Gula, spotted the car heading toward Niagara. He tried to pursue it. He put his siren on, but he lost sight of the Pantera almost immediately. He was just too fast.
And then the crash happened, near St. Catharines.
Near the Lake Street exit, yes. It seems he lost control as he was approaching a curve. He hit the center grass median.
And a recessed sewer structure in that median?
That impact was catastrophic. It caused the car to flip multiple times, and it finally landed on its roof in the opposite lanes.
The violence of that crash is made clear by where his body was found.
Tragically, yes. The material is very explicit. He was not wearing a seatbelt. The force of the collision ejected him from the car.
He was found 123 feet from the vehicle.
He was pronounced dead at St. Catharines General Hospital. The hockey world was just stunned. A legend had been playing hours before, and now he was gone.
In the immediate aftermath, though, the facts about what caused the crash were extremely limited.
That is a pivotal part of this story.
This lack of transparency shaped the public story for decades.
It did. There was no official public inquiry after his death. The autopsy results were withheld from the public. Police just said they wouldn't state whether he was intoxicated.
And that protected his image.
It effectively protected the legend for 30 years. It allowed the public narrative to focus only on the tragic accident, the loss of a great man, without any of the complicating factors.
But in 2005, the facts finally came out. A redacted autopsy report was released.
And it painted a much darker, much more complicated picture of what happened that night.
It fundamentally changed our understanding of his death.
It revealed several issues that all contributed to the outcome. First, his blood alcohol level was found to be twice the legal limit.
And there was a half-filled bottle of vodka found at the scene.
Yes. But the other complicating factor, the one that is maybe most essential to understanding his loss of control, wasn't just the alcohol.
It was the pharmaceutical cocktail in his possession.
Exactly. The report confirmed he had 2 prescription drugs with him. The first was dexedrine, which is a powerful stimulant.
And the second?
The second was Dexamyl. It's a stimulant sedative compound. The autopsy found traces of amylobarbital, which is an ingredient in Dexamyl, in his blood.
We need to pause here and really provide some context. What is the effect of mixing powerful prescription stimulants and sedatives and then adding a large amount of alcohol, all while driving a high-performance sports car after playing an NHL game?
The combination is just. It's incredibly volatile, profoundly dangerous. Dexedrine is an amphetamine.
So it's used to fight fatigue, stay focused?
Which you can imagine a 44-year-old athlete trying to keep up with younger players might need, or to manage chronic pain. Dexamyl is even more complex. It has both a stimulant and a sedative.
Why would someone take that?
It was often prescribed to manage anxiety or sleep issues that could come from using stimulants, or just from the pressures of his life.
So he could have been trying to push through exhaustion while also managing the side effects of the drugs he was using to do that.
Precisely. But when you add alcohol to that mix of powerful uppers and downers, you get a catastrophic failure of judgment and coordination.
The stimulants can make you feel more sober than you are.
They create a false sense of alertness, masking how impaired you really are from the alcohol. His reflexes, the ones he would need to handle a Pantera at high speed on a curve, would have been severely compromised by the alcohol. Even the drugs made him feel awake.
This provides that medical context for why an experienced driver in a perfectly functional car could lose control so violently.
It does. And it's also important to note what the autopsy did not find.
Which was?
Despite the jaw and ankle injuries from the game, they found no traditional painkillers in his system.
Which suggests that the drugs were less about managing acute pain and more about managing performance or focus or stress.
That seems to be the case. The Pantera was also found to be in good working order, so no mechanical failure.
And just to clarify the scene of the crash, the details show he wasn't in a high-speed police chase when he lost control.
That is another important clarification in the material. Although Officer Gula briefly saw him speeding and started a pursuit, he lost sight of the car very quickly.
So the police were not right behind him.
The sources stressed there was nothing to suggest Horton was actively evading police, or that the police were even close enough to be in a criminal pursuit when the crash happened. It was a solitary, tragic loss of control.
Rooted in that combination of speed and substances.
Yes, he was later interred at York Cemetery in Toronto.
We have to move now to the business aftermath, which involved the very rapid sale of his ownership stake in the donut chain.
The dynamic there was harsh and it was swift. Ron Joyce, his business partner, the man who had seen him just hours before.
He offered Horton's widow, Lori, $1 million for her shares in the company.
And at that point, the chain already had 40 stores. It was substantial. Lori accepted the offer.
Which made Ron Joyce the sole owner.
That's right.
So the crucial question is, was $1 million a reasonable offer for a 40-store chain in 1974? Or was it a clear lowball offer, leveraging a widow's immediate grief and shock?
It's a very complex question, and it's at the heart of the legal fight that happened years later.
$1 million was a lot of money in '74.
It was a significant amount of money. But the business model was clearly poised for exponential growth. The material confirms it was already a multi-million-dollar franchise system by 1968.
So while it might have been a fair price for a quick liquidation,
That certainly did not reflect the enormous future potential that Joyce immediately began to unlock.
and the conflict over that valuation, it led to a long legal battle years later as the company just exploded in size.
Exactly. As the chain grew into a national institution, Lori Horton became, as the source says, dissatisfied with the deal she'd accepted.
She filed a lawsuit against Joyce.
She did, seeking further payment. She believed her family had been cheated out of the immense fortune that was built on her husband's name and his initial investment.
But she lost that lawsuit.
She did. She lost in 1993, and her appeal was declined in 1995. The courts essentially sided with the fact that she had willingly accepted the buyout offer at the time.
And Lori Horton passed away in 2000.
She died in 2000 at the age of 68, having never reclaimed a larger piece of the company her husband founded.
The scale of the business under Ron Joyce's sole ownership really underscores the incredible magnitude of what the Horton family missed out on.
The expansion was just exponential, probably unpredictable even to Joyce himself back in 1974. He took it from those 40 stores at the time of Horton's death
to nearly 4,600 stores in Canada alone by 2013.
And today, the company is a globally recognized flagship brand, operating under the huge conglomerate Restaurant Brands International.
The contrast between that $1 million buyout and the company's modern multi-billion-dollar valuation is one of the most sobering parts of this entire story.
It really is.
And yet, the family ties still remain connected to the business even if the primary ownership was lost.
Yes. The legacy is complicated. Ron Joyce Jr., the son of the man who bought out Lori Horton, is married to Horton's eldest daughter, Geraldine Horton Joyce.
And Geraldine herself was a franchisee.
She was, in Cobourg, Ontario, until just recently, in 2023. So the name is still deeply woven into the company's fabric. It shows that while the family lost the control and the massive wealth, that cultural and familial link to the business still persists.
It's just such a complicated meeting of sports history, private struggle, and aggressive capitalism.
It truly is a snapshot of a very different time in both professional sports and business.
So when we analyze the full sweep of this material, we see a life story that is, it's magnificent in its achievements and just profoundly tragic in its end.
It is.
The picture that really emerges is of a man defined by this incredible strength, focus, a relentless work ethic on the ice, but whose life ended prematurely, complicated by substance use and the immense pressure of trying to sustain two careers at once.
That synthesis is so important. The sources really demand that we move beyond the simple portrait of a folk hero. On one hand, you have the monumental figure, the Hall of Famer, the co-founder of a national institution.
And on the other hand?
On the other, the details of his death, the speed, the high blood alcohol, that mix of powerful prescription drugs, they reveal the hidden pressures and the struggles that so often go along with that level of intensity and fame.
And the fact that those details were obscured for 30 years.
It just illustrates how powerful the drive is to protect the public image of a sporting legend.
And yet his name, Tim Horton, is still arguably the most recognizable name attached to any company in Canada. The legacy of the athlete is all tangled up with the entrepreneur.
But the human being, Miles Gilbert Horton, often gets lost inside the icon.
It's absolutely true. The brand is so ubiquitous. It's a part of daily life for millions of people. And most of them who order a coffee every morning likely have no idea they're patronizing a company founded by one of the toughest, most celebrated, and yet tragically flawed defensemen in the history of the NHL.
That separation between the public identity and the private reality is the most powerful lesson we can take from this entire story.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to consider. How often do we as a society accept the clean, celebrated image of a public figure, the Stanley Cup champion, the founder, and just willingly ignore or separate that image from the complex human struggles and the difficult truths that are revealed in detailed sources like this? And what does that gap really mean for how we construct our historical memory?
A powerful question that hangs over this entire narrative.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.